Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Relationship Schools podcast here. I'm your host, Jason Gaddis. Grateful as hell to be here. I feel fortunate that I get to speak from the ethers to you during a challenging time and try to bring you a lot of value and awesome people who are trying to help us sort this stuff out as we go through kind of a global pandemic here. As you'll notice, some of the episodes have been more geared toward that than just maybe a typical relationship podcast. I'll start weaving those back in, but I want to make sure this is relevant to you and it's helping you in this time of need. All right? Yeah, and thanks again for all your reviews, comments, your shares, your likes, etc. That helps us reach more people and impact the world in an awesome, awesome way. If you're not a part of our free Facebook community, go to relationshipschool.com/community. Also follow me on YouTube, Jason Gaddis, okay? Jason with a Y. Okay. In this episode, we have Cory Muscara, who is an awesome meditation teacher. And I brought him on because I felt like it would be helpful to ground us through some mindfulness. Okay, so if you're still going through ebbs and flows of fear, anxiety, feeling maybe overwhelmed, there's an awesome practice in this podcast. It's 5 to 8 steps or so on how to stay grounded, okay, and how to just really be with the intensity of what's going on around you. So this could apply if you're listening to this 2 years from now. Crisis is over, but maybe there's a different crisis or different difficult thing you're going through. This podcast can help you. Okay, Cory is he's a graduate of the 2-year Spirit Rock Community Dharma Leader Training. He's got several years of extensive professional training in mindfulness-based stress reduction. This guy's done a lot. Studied with Breathworks Chronic Pain, the Trauma Institute with Bessel van der Kolk, circling. This guy has done yoga, Hatha yoga teacher training, NLP practitioner, man, on and on. And he spent 6 months in silence, living as a monk in Burma, meditating 14 hours a day. So this guy knows his stuff. He's very, very experienced and just a great guy. So Cory has a new book also called Stop Messing Your Life. I've got it here. I'm digging into it and it's good. So check that out at the end here when he announces where to get all his stuff. But, in the meantime, just really listen to what we're talking about here. I think this is a good reframe around meditation, mindfulness in general, and a good practical modern way to meditate, if you will. Okay? All right. Enjoy. Here we go. Welcome to the show, Cory Muscara.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, dude. Good to see you and good to have you here, man.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here too. You're doing really cool work with this podcast, and hope I can contribute something in a meaningful way.
Oh, I'm sure you will, man. I thought of you certainly during this crisis many times, just like, wow, Cory's helping so many people calm down. Maybe be with their fear or their experience or whatever's going on. So I thought it'd be really valuable for us to have a conversation and see if, again, another reminder, whether we're going through the coronavirus in its thick moment or the economy's tanking or whatever crisis we're having right now, I thought it would be really valuable to learn from you here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got it, man. So tell the listener, if they don't know you, maybe some of them do, who you are and what you're up to in the world.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, for the last 8-10 years, I've been, a lot of my work started on Long Island, running the Long Island Center for Mindfulness. So the big thing you can put on my business card is probably mindfulness, meditation teacher. I've taught mindfulness-based leadership at Columbia University as part of one of their graduate programs, and currently teach positive psychology at University of Pennsylvania. So I'm in the academic world as well, and run retreats, workshops, immersion experiences in a similar way that you do. and do a lot of speaking for education, healthcare, and organizations. I'm still working on what the big thing is that encapsulates like what I do. And when you're in a thought leadership space, there's always this pressure to like figure out what your big word is or what your marketing is.
Right.
I don't know what it is. I mean, mindfulness kind of encapsulates it, but I think my podcast title, if anything, has most encapsulated what it is my intention is as a teacher. The podcast is titled "Practicing Human," and that's really just what I'm interested in my own personal work and in the spaces that I create for other people. It's just exploring all of the layers, the nuances of what it means to be human, how to navigate it more skillfully, how to amplify what is good and mitigate some of what's difficult, and really become more whole human beings. So I straddle a lot of different domains to find answers in that, from the yoga, tai chi, deep meditation, positive psychology, traditional psychology, some stuff in the sexuality space. All in service of this bigger question where I think many of us are looking for, which is like, how do we live well?
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And your new book's called Stop Missing Your Life, right?
Yes, stop missing your life. I wanted to call it Permission to Be Human. Actually, I wanted to call it Deep Presence. People said that sounded like an 80s porno, so that got nixed. and then Permission to Be Human was the next one. And when you're working with publishers, they have their own ideas. So Stop Missing Your Life, How to Be Deeply Present in an Unpresent World.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. And I'm digging into that book right now. Have it on my nightstand.
Thanks, man.
So yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Thanks for doing that work and writing it.
Yeah.
The obvious question for me here is, how the hell did you get into meditation, mindfulness work in the first place?
Yeah, for no noble reasons. I was trying to impress a girl. I had a hippie girlfriend in college when I was like 19, 20. She was in a meditation. I wanted her to think I was cool, so I started meditating. She broke up with me about 2 weeks later, so there's no happy ending there. But there was a different happy ending, which is that it was like the pain of that breakup that caused me to take the practice more seriously. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I just put my hands on my belly, like lie in my dorm room bed, and focus on my breath. And I would think, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And it was this very basic, like, mind wander, come back to the breath, mind wander, come back to the breath. Didn't know the nuances of the practice. Just like, it's like, oh, this is the most easy, stupid thing in the world. And I just did it. I just made this New Year's resolution to do it. And one thing I'm good at is like following through with those things, even if I don't understand why. And yeah, in a short period of time, noticed some cool things happening. My sleep improved radically. I used to have very restless sleep. I'd wake up like 30 times a night, just a light sleeper. And started doing the meditation. I went from waking up 30 times a night to only a couple times a night, and then started having nights where I wasn't waking up at all. So that shifted, and I was like, well, something going on here. My focus improved radically. I was going to class, but I wasn't actually in class. My body was there, but my mind was someplace else entirely.
Yeah.
And I think most people can resonate probably listening to this.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe people listening right now are not even here. And it's like, nobody's fault. It's just what the mind does, especially in our culture right now.
Yeah.
So I wanted to focus and be present, but I had like the classic diagnoses of ADD. Then started doing a meditation and developed this thing that some people call paying attention. And for me, it felt like a superpower. Became a better listener, was more grounded, learning was easier. And just overall, like there was this new quality of happiness that was developing that wasn't like something radical. It's not like the clouds parted and the light came through and all my problems went away. But there was this sense of something shifting from the inside out that I had never really experienced before. Most of my way of cultivating well-being up until that point was around manipulating the external variables of my life. I wouldn't have phrased it that way at the time, but that's more or less what I was doing. And like a sense of once I get there, or once I have that, then I'll be happy. And, that's classic. I mean, the idea of like that not leading to happiness is nothing revolutionary. Any good personal development thing worth its salt will say. Like, it's not going to happen from external sources. But it was just it, and I knew that, and yet I still just had this subconscious sense of like, no, once I graduate college, or once I have that job, or once I have just enough money to be able to do some of the stuff in my life, it was like, once that, then this. And the real kicker in it all was like, I was actually seeing that there were times where all of the puzzle pieces of my life were arranging in the way that I wanted them to. Like the relationship, the job prospects, the family stuff, like it was all good. And I had what I thought I wanted, and then I'd be happy. And then 2 days later, it would be like, okay, now it needs to be bigger, better, different.
Yeah.
And it threw me for a loop, and I didn't really know what to make of it, but I did feel like I was climbing this ladder with an infinite number of rungs, not feeling like I was getting anywhere substantial. And so when I graduated college, I wanted to explore what is the potential to cultivate some quality of contentment that is not so contingent upon external variables.
Yeah.
And that took me over to Burma in Southeast Asia, where did a 6.5 month silent meditation retreat, lived as a monk. And the idea of that was to really just sever myself from everything in my life that was currently bringing me fulfillment, to see if I could cultivate it within. It's a bit of important to probably name earlier than later, like a one-dimensional view and a mass. I'm curious if you would categorize this as like a masculine way of like finding happiness. But like, yes, it's possible to cultivate like it's hard to cultivate a well-being independent of all the things that you're used to.
Yeah.
And like, I'm in a monastery, very thin mattresses, eating 2 meals, meditating 14 hours a day. It's hot, there's mosquitoes. Like, yeah, it's hard. And at the same time, there was probably like a subconscious part of me, the more introverted part of me, that's like, oh, I kind of like this. This is easier than like leaning into relationship complexity or some of the other realities of life. Totally. And so while the initial motivation was to like explore this for very noble reasons, as I came back into the world, I said, wow, it's in many ways, it was much easier doing that work there, and integrating this into real life is a whole other ballgame. Yeah. And that's been more of my work now.
That's so cool. We're going to dig into relationships a little bit because that's the nature of this podcast. But I'm remembering of Jack Kornfield in his book, Path with Heart, that I read in grad school. The first chapter was something like he went off to a monastery and meditated, and he came back into the world, and he reached a certain level of, I don't know, wakefulness or whatever, and he was very kind of tranquil. And then he came back into the world, and his relationship life was still a mess.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank you. Because so many meditators can use meditation as an escape from what's challenging in everyday life. And I know that's not what you promote, but I just wanted to like name that, and perhaps we can have a conversation also about kind of the spiritual bypassing stuff that people do with meditation. But I'm just curious to get your thoughts, because it sounds like you had a similar experience. Like you came back from this huge retreat, going very deep in yourself, and then it was like, oh, life is still very complex and challenging.
Yes. Yeah. I love the Jack Kornfield anecdote, and I love you bringing it in. And it's been an interesting territory for me to navigate in my work. Because at least in the early stages of my work, when I was just like very specifically teaching mindfulness and meditation, there were just issues that I saw people navigating that I knew this practice would be good for, and at the same time could easily perpetuate the patterns of conditioning that were creating issues in that person's life.
Yeah. Like
their inclination to go within rather than like express their feelings and emotions. And there's a big emphasis on non-reactivity in the meditation space, which is powerful, and having self-regulation is huge. Mm-hmm. But within a relationship, you could easily get caught up in like, oh, I'm feeling this thing right now, but I need to like work through it on my own. This isn't that person's problem. And so you end up withdrawing, not bringing it in, and not actually connecting, even though it's a practice about connection.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of gaps for me. And I saw a lot of people using practice to spiritually bypass, and I just don't think you should ever go to a monk for relationship advice.
Yeah.
And that's often what happens. I mean, you hold these really wise beings in one dimension, like a certain dimension of wisdom, to have the answers for everything, and then you go to them with marriage questions, and they'll give like a certain kind of answer, but it's I so want to see some of these beings like in relationships, in the complexity of that, so that they could really put their practice to use, and then see what they would say in response to some of this stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
absolutely.
those are like some of my latest feelings around it.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, as you know, I was in a Buddhist community for 5 or so years, practicing Vajrayana Buddhism and meditating,
Mhm.
a couple of months out of the year for a month at a time, and group practice and solitary retreats. And it changed my life. I mean, it really, I think I told you this, it really helped me get okay with my experience. That was something I didn't know how to be with, was
Mm.
just okay with anything that was going on, right? Especially on an emotional level. And like you were suggesting there, I started to look to my teacher for advice about everything, instead of just mindfulness. And I think the teacher's trap is always to think they know now that they can answer questions about money or relationships or whatever else because they have this amazing presence, right?
Yeah.
And that was not certainly my teacher's fault at the time, but I sort of made that mistake of putting him in a position where he was supposed to answer all my kind of answers about all things. And then it, wasn't until he slept with one of the students that, and it sort of came out that it sort of set me free back on myself. Like, oh, right, I need to actually seek counsel in the areas that I want counsel from, in those areas, right? Like a person on finance that actually studies that stuff for a living.
Yeah.
And that was new to me at the time. So it was actually a real blessing, kind of put me back on myself, because I'm sure you get that a lot especially a meditation teacher, you can be lumped into as a spiritual teacher. And now you're receiving everybody's projections of how perfect you need to be and how you have to have all your shit together in all areas of life. And it's just not realistic, right?
Yes. And as you made that transition, did you feel any resentment toward the community or advice that they had maybe given you that you might have taken more seriously than you should have at the time?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was initially hurt and upset and blamey. And then it took me a number of inner working sessions with other people to help me see my part in the whole dynamic.
Mm.
And then it was very liberating. And then I was able to be really grateful for my teacher and still hold this teacher in really high regard, because he, changed my life.
Yeah, that feels like an important evolution in all of this. And I think it's good for everyone, like listening to, or at least what I'm interested in is in us kind of like leaning into, again, the complexity of all of this. And what I see, it's especially true in American culture, like this swinging toward one side of the polarity, or the pendulum going back and forth, where it's like, okay, this is great, this person is great, and then there's something that that compromises that the sense of that person, and then we go, okay, so everything they represent is awful, and then you swing in the other direction.
Yeah.
And we're just constantly looking for, we might not phrase it this way, but like the Messiah, or the thing that has the answers. And we don't, even though there's limitations with these practices and these teachers that are very mature on one level, not mature in another way, I don't think we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And a big part of my journey has been like figuring out what is working, what is good, what do each of these domains have to share. And the more I think they can communicate, and more people like you in the world that are traversing these domains and trying to integrate them, the more powerful an offering we have for more people to make sense of all of this.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really cool that you've also, you study psychology, you've studied circling, you've gone to a number of other trainings to do exactly what you're sort of suggesting there, which again,
Yeah.
I think helps you probably guide people better into their experience. And would you say, like, what would you say like when people come to a retreat with you, what is the essence? I know there's probably a lot you're teaching, but is the essence of what you're teaching kind of what you were saying earlier of just like how to be human, or is it more how to be with your experience, or how to not react in turbulent times, or like what would you say the essence of what you're trying to show people how to do?
Yeah, I think I'm helping them. What it seems to be is developing an internal safety to experience what they're experiencing with curiosity.
Hmm.
Um, and I distinguish internal safety versus external safety. The external safety would be more the safe space domain, which is again something that has some negatives, but not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are a lot of people that are not in experiences or communities or spaces where it's safe to be who they are, express dimensions of
Right.
themselves. And I think, especially in a relationship, it's incredibly important to understand what your role might be in creating safety for a person to share more dimensions of themselves. And at the same time, we can't depend on other people and the world to provide that safety for us, because we'll never get it in 100% fulfillment.
Yeah.
And so there's internal work that we can do that allows us to actually start to feel and hold space for and experience the many parts of us, the parts that we enjoy, appreciate, and savor, but the shadow parts, the despised self parts, the areas we've compartmentalized and shut down. Meditation, if anything, is a really powerful tool to build an internal safety container that allows experiences to arise without immediately being shunned or judged.
Hmm.
And that, as a first step in the process of how you interact in the world, allows for a certain kind of wholeness that then makes it a little easier to maybe bring those parts to another person, or to feel that, oh, I can be myself in the world. I can take a stand in how I want to show up, and know that I can hold whatever arises, the shame, the pain, the vulnerability of that. And so much of why we don't take risks, or we don't act what we might perceive as authentically in the world, is because of a fear of the discomfort that could arise if we do that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that meditation practice does is it allows us to learn how to hold space for that discomfort, to not identify so strongly with it. And that enables us to take more risks, or be more of ourselves in the world, a more full expression of presence.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, this is really timely right now, which I wanted to, part of the reason I wanted to bring you on is because we're in a really intense time economically and socially and interpersonally, just with people staying at home because of the coronavirus, and being on lockdown, and et cetera, and all the stress and fear that comes up from not only getting sick but not being able to pay rent next month. People are, there's a lot of fear going on here, and I'm just curious. This seems like a good segue to ask you about how do we work with what's going on right now externally, because based on your model here of like external, internal safety, I could keep trying to look to the government or somebody, my boss or someone, to provide that level of safety that maybe they can't do, because I'm probably not going to relax waiting for that external safety. So this is like the perfect time to practice that internal safety you're talking about. So I'm curious, how do we do that?
Yeah, right. Yeah, as I'm navigating this time with other people and myself, and I get people reaching out for suggestions for how to navigate this. It has been interesting to think through it, and to think through the different frames through which we might offer an answer to this question of like, how do we get through this? Because on maybe like the very practical level, there are lots of tips and strategies for managing the thoughts, the emotions, creating space for it, and not getting so caught up in anxiety, which are important, and I'm happy to share those. On We might even say more of like a spiritual level, this is an amazing opportunity to do some pretty significant work.
Hell yeah.
So what COVID-19 does is it kind of obliterates the thin veil of control that we often walk around with in our lives. Most people, any sense of like things being good or for a lot of people's happiness, it's just because the elements of their life have been arranged in a particular way for a particular period of time that has just made it seem like, oh, life is, I got this, I can get through this, or not much to worry about. But anyone that's ever been through anything difficult, whether it's a massive relationship breakup, loss of a loved one, being betrayed, or experiencing 2020 as it seems right now, sees just how quickly that sense of control and well-being can be lost, and how this is just like always an inch behind our heels. So it's connecting us to this deeper human truth that at the heart of everything, we don't nearly have as much control as we think we do. And at some point in our lives, we're going to have to confront that. Usually it's on our deathbed. And I haven't been there. So this is more just like more through meditations I've done and reflections of people I've talked to. But where we like really are confronted with like, oh, there's nothing I can do in the world right now. There's no decorating of myself. There's no amount of money I can make. And there's even like not necessarily any relationship I could have that is going to solve this problem that like I need to transition out of this life. Now, we're not necessarily in this moment, but we are connecting to this deep vulnerability as human beings, and the fear that comes up in that space. So for anyone listening right now and like noticing what you're going through in relationship to this, the first thing I would say is, instead of quickly defaulting to how do I get rid of this fear or manage it or work with these thoughts, it's just to give it some space to be felt. To go vertical with it rather than horizontal, where horizontal might be like, I'm here, I'm trying to get there. Be here and allow yourself to feel being here. Because any spiritual work, any deep human stuff is going to require getting familiar with this space of fear and anxiety. And any real kind of peace that we could develop in our lives can only come through meeting this experience that we're having right now, and learning to be with it in a different way, or hold space for it in a different way than maybe we're typically used to. So that like the practicals of this is like just take a deep breath to begin. So, and let's all do this together, right? So just breathing into the nose and slowly out through the mouth. And then feel where the body is gripping in relationship to what's going on right now. Often it will be in the jaw. So you can invite the jaw to relax. Allow the muscles in the face to soften. The shoulders can start to be at ease. The belly, notice if that's gripping, sucking in, tightening. The hands, are they clenched to something? So just giving the body an opportunity to relax. It's vulnerable for the body to relax. When we're in a fear response, we're going to tighten up. We're going to be prepared to react or for battle. So inviting the body to relax actually forces us to be with the vulnerability of the emotion, the fear, more openly. And then just sense what it's like to feel whatever it is you're feeling right now without immediately making it wrong, trying to get rid of it. We're trying to fix it in some way. So this, which really won't take more than like 10 seconds, and is something that we get to experience right now together, is the first step for me with this kind of work. And this is what it means to start to meet your experience, to hold space for your experience, and start to develop an internal safety to experience that experience. And then, as a practical second point, it would just be thanking the fear for arising, because it's trying to help in some way. It's trying to protect us. It's trying to tell us that this is something important to tend to. It's usually the ego trying to regain control, and so we appreciate that part of us that that just wants to survive, that wants to do well, that wants things to go back to how it was. And so we send that part of us to thank you. It's like, thanks for showing up. I appreciate you telling me this is important.
Yeah.
And once we've settled into that, then just looking at like, okay, well, what is a story in my mind and what is actually here? So shifting the what if to what is, or oscillating between the what if to what is. The what if mind is, what if this happens? What if that goes wrong? All of that helps us prepare. The what is mind is like, what is actually here? And usually we see that this moment is less of a catastrophe than the mind is making it out to be. So too much what is, and we don't take action for what could happen in the future. Too much what if, and we're riddled and racked with stress or anxiety. So we're just going back and forth between what if and then what is. And then asking, what can I control? This is a key step in reclaiming a sense of hope and moving out of helplessness. So there's a book called Learned Hopefulness by Dr. Dan Tomasulo. And it's really like, what are the steps to cultivating hope? And one of the first ones is just looking at, what can you influence? What can I do now? Even asking that question, what can I do now?
Yeah.
It might be as simple as like making this phone call to this person who needs help, or let me check in on my parents, or let me send an email to my clients, or have an honest conversation with my kids about what's going on. Even though it might not be like an answer to the full thing, that exercising of autonomy in some way activates different parts of the brain that triggers what's called the dorsal raphe nucleus. And when that is activated, it essentially overrides the helplessness response. So that helplessness response is where we're going to get depression, overwhelm, not wanting to do anything, and feeling like we can't do anything. So starting to regain some control. What can I do now? And then the last thing I would offer people is it possible to do what you need to do with less stress than you're currently experiencing? So if you were to evaluate on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is total zen and 10 is total hot mess, where on that number line do you need to be to do what you need to do effectively? And the effectively piece is key, because I'm not saying just do whatever you need to do and half-ass it. Like, there's important stuff you might need to do in relationship to crisis, important actions you need to take, emails you need to write. What is the level of stress, if any, that is required to do that well, to feel like you're being on top of your game? And that sort of assessment, for many people, they'll start to see that, oh, you know what, I can actually do this I'm at a 6, but I can do everything I need to do and be at a 3. I can relax my body, I can relax my mind, and I could just make this phone call. I could write this email, I could have this conversation with my kids. And so just talking it through very logically in that way can help us navigate in the moment without being totally overwhelmed.
Yeah, this is great. Wow. Hey guys, quick interruption from yours truly about our upcoming workshop. If you want to learn how to feel more accepted and connected in your partnership or family relationships or work relationship, you're going to need to do one thing, folks, and that's learn how to work through conflict. That's right. Conflict is that thing that ruins most relationships. It's people's inability and unwillingness to work through that. That's really the issue. It's not conflict itself. That's not the problem. It's our ineptitude. All right. And really, it's all about the repair. So if you want to come learn how, guess what? You can do it from anywhere in the world now. New Zealand, Australia, Asia, Africa, the States, Canada, anywhere you are, you don't have to buy a plane ticket or lodging. It's only $197, super early bird deal. End of April, that price goes up. So hurry and get in now, folks. Go to relationshipschool.com/connected to get the deal. Plus, you can bring a friend for super cheap as well. Okay, come play with us, come have fun, and come be the kind of person who's going to change how we do conflict, all right? You all know, being in quarantine, that's the pressure goes up, right? And it shows you where you're weak and strong in your relationship life. So please come learn, be that kind of leader, and we'll see you in there. relationshipschool.com/connected. All right, back to the podcast. Okay, let me just review these. See if I got it right.
Yeah, there are 5 of them.
Cool. I put it in my own little 8 steps, but I know
Cool. I'd love
some
to
of you
hear that then.
are merging these, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Just so the first thing is give it space to be felt. Second, breathe. And then 3 and 4, you're probably putting in one step, but I heard kind of notice where your body is gripping and then notice what you're feeling and feel it.
Yes.
And then thank the fear that's arising. I love this. What is the story instead or what is the story instead of what if stories?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
not, it's not like an either or.
if.
You're saying both, right? Like we need to maybe play with and titrate between what is versus what if. So I love that.
Yes.
That's so cool. And then, man, I think a lot of people are going to feel some, I don't know, liberation maybe when they get this step of what can I control? Because all of us can control something, right? We can stand up and go get something to eat. We can go to the bathroom. We can do things that are very small, or like you said, send an email to a friend asking for help. So that's huge, I think. And then this, I'm really loving this last question of, is it possible to do what I need to do with less stress? I mean, that again, it kind of puts it back on me where I have to think about my choice. That you're sort of suggesting there's actually choice in what I'm feeling right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. I think many of us are subconsciously anchored to our anxiety. We associate it with getting things done and doing good work in the world. And for some people, that's not even a subconscious association. They'll defend their anxiety. And just saying like, I need this I am who I am because of my anxiety. And that's why it's important to have a very logical conversation with your brain around this, where if you feel like, just in the context of where we're at right now, COVID-19, things are changing. The economy is tanking. People are thrust into a new kind of way of having to relate to their family. Businesses are crashing. Everything is shifting in a radical way. And the default response tends to be in those moments. And I think the default belief is that I'm supposed to be agitated. I need to be agitated. All of this happening requires an agitated response. And that's fair. And I'm not saying let's dismiss that, because there might be a lot of truth to it, but I am saying let's challenge it. And if you think you need to be at an 8 to do what you do, then what is it that an 8 gives you that a 7 can't give you? And what is it that 7 gives you that like a 5 can't give you?
So such a great way of thinking about it.
That.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
Yeah, no, it's all good. And so just going through that logically helps us be able to start to release some of that subconscious anchoring to what we perceive as necessary anxiety or stress.
Yeah, I mean, just as we did that, I felt like I moved from less choice to more choice. That's what happened for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
I felt more empowered to, I don't know, just to have a little more command over what is going on internally. It's again back to that internal sense of safety, versus feeling kind of reactive and powerless to change anything, right? And then I'm at the whims of my nervous system and my scared animal going on in my brain. And so it's cool to just kind of see that in just a couple of minutes here. And I think it goes without saying, Cory, that you would probably agree that, stress just isn't good for us. Long term, it's not great for us. And a lot of us live with chronic day in and day out stress. And in this COVID-19 situation, we're kind of adding another layer. And so I think this tool is a super valuable tool right now to be practicing every day. And I also just had to add, I also love this because so much of how I learned to meditate was just shamatha vipassana style meditation, where there wasn't a lot of self-inquiry sort of like this is I sort of felt that in the beginning, more shamatha, kind of like to notice what's happening. We could say follow your breath, but you're saying let's actually really look at what's going on inside, and let's even ask ourselves questions like, what can I control while I'm in meditation? And I love this because it feels a little unconventional or untraditional in terms of meditation lineages I'm aware of, but so much more helpful maybe for the modern person. It's like, no, I actually need some uh, logical, conceptual framework to think differently, not to stop my thinking, but to actually harness my thinking. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's very fair to say. And me integrating some of this other stuff is, coming from other traditions or my own thoughts about where there might be gaps in the usual meditation practice. But where people often do get stuck with meditation, especially in times of crisis and uncertainty, is where it leaves them for how to respond. And uh, let's just say you did a basic meditation practice, awareness of breath. It would accomplish a lot of what I'm talking about in these different steps of like, okay, focusing on the breath, inviting the body to relax, checking in with like what is actually going on. But there's not as much emphasis on respecting the what if mind, uh, and since we are in the relative world and we have family that we're trying to take care of and businesses and money we need to make, and we can't just be in a monastery and allow things. I mean, we're allowing things to unfold as they will, but we do want to take intentional action. I think balancing that what if mind and the what is mind is really important, and honoring the human truth, which is that when we are in touch with having some sense of agency over our experience, it does activate different parts of the brain that are going to override the helplessness response, which is going to be the thing that triggers depression. And let's also be clear that control doesn't necessarily look like, or doesn't just look like knowing all of the steps and actually doing something. Control can also look like the ability to watch your experience coming and going, and choosing not to react to it. So that space between stimulus and response and being able to rest in it is a form of activating a sense of control. Non-doing is still a choice. So yeah, I do think there are limitations in a lot of traditional practices, especially when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, and I just appreciate the I don't know, the modernity here that you're bringing to it from your own experience about what you maybe see helps yourself and helps other people. Which sometimes it's like okay to problem solve. I was just interviewed a Navy SEAL, and he's a mindfulness guy, and one of his techniques was absolutely to get in there and like ask yourself while you're meditating, to ask yourself some really critical questions. And again, I found that really helpful because I think I made myself wrong early on, especially in my meditation, because I wasn't kind of doing it right or following the strict sort of monastic kind of guidelines.
Yeah. There can be some spiritual shaming that can
Right.
happen
Or
with
at
this.
least internally too, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I resonate with that. Cool. I'm glad we can make it more inclusive to lots of different perspectives.
Yeah, it's very user friendly. Cory, I'm curious because we're sort of talking about this what is versus what if. Another place I go with this is the seeming paradox of personal growth sometimes of self-acceptance versus self-mastery. I'm curious what what your thoughts are on that.
Ooh, that is a big one, Jason, and I love it. This is probably the biggest thing that I am navigating in my work of being a human being. Um, I'll debunk. Well, at least I'll try to debunk some of like the myths around like self-acceptance, or when we start becoming really grateful for our life and appreciating our life. There's often this fear that we're not going to care or want to grow anymore or want to move toward mastery. There's not much research to support that. And the research seems to support the opposite, especially as it relates to gratitude. The more appreciative we are of our lives and who we are, the more motivation we actually tend to feel toward our goals and our pursuits, and the more energy we have for it. Where that sometimes isn't the case is when our motivation is driven primarily by fear and anxiety. So like a sense of, I need to do this in order to be worthy in the world.
Hmm.
Yes, it is the case that as you start getting more fulfilled and okay with yourself, you may lose some of that motivation to make $100 million as a way to like subconsciously um, please your father or your mother. That might start to subside, and some of those motivating factors that drove you into the ground in your work
Hmm.
um, may no longer be there in the same way. And so it's important to know that up front. I remember I taught Gary Vaynerchuk meditation on the 10%
Oh,
Happier
wow.
podcast.
Nice.
And he's someone that's like, Gary is so in his truth, a
Yeah.
provocative figure, but like he's so him, and he's just doing it and living it and manifesting whatever he wants. And I genuinely believe he has like a certain kind of happiness that, and he believes he's very happy in his life, and I'm not here to challenge that. And his one of his fears always with the meditation, because he's a big proponent of it but doesn't do it himself, is that like he says, I don't want to mess with my wiring. And he says this publicly, like, I don't want to mess with my wiring. Like, I'm in such a flow. Like, I don't want to get rid of that. And and my response is like, you got a point, man. Like, I'm not going to tell you that that's not true.
Yeah.
You might have some pretty big awakening experience and decide that you might actually choose to slow down enough to listen to what people are actually saying in interviews, or you might reevaluate like wanting to own the jets or do.
Sure.
I can't say that won't happen. What I can say is, in my experience with these practices, any sort of insight awakening that arises, if it reorganizes me in any way, it is in a way that I don't regret, and
Hmm.
is in a way that aligns me with a certain kind of fulfillment that is what I most need, even if it wasn't necessarily what I thought I wanted.
Hmm.
Um, so I still haven't met anyone that has done these practices deeply and then just completely removed themselves from the world. The only example I could think of is like monks who commit their lives to this and then just live in a monastery. But most people listening are not going to take it that far. And if you do, there's a different kind of purpose that
Yep.
you start identifying with. For those that just have a meditation practice, um, uh, you're if anything, you're going to start to develop a relationship with yourself that allows you to do your work in the world with much greater ease and from a place of inspiration and peace and enthusiasm, rather fear, anxiety, and self-hate.
Nice.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, so cool. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Gary Vee because that's a good example of someone who's extremely driven, right? And they're into more
Yeah.
maybe self mastery. But a lot of ambitious people, not saying him, but certainly a lot of ambitious people are running from something or trying to prove something, right? And it's pretty clear from a lot of successful folks I've worked with that, like you talked about trying to prove it to dad, and some people are just running from their past or the pain of their experience, right? And so
Yeah.
there is something really powerful about it. The very least being in choice about it, right?
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And let's also like maybe make that the key thing for everything that we're discussing here. One of the reasons I was so drawn to my work is that there was no doctrine associated with it, at least secular mindfulness. It was not saying what you should do or how you have to be in the world. It was more trying to connect you to this innate part of yourself that is able to stand in your human experience and see like, oh, I can be with this and I could choose how I want to be in relationship to it. How you want to be in relationship to it is up to you. How you
Hmm.
react once you see what you see is totally up to you. Different religions and maybe Buddhist frameworks might have clear ideas of what that should be. But when we're talking about basic mindfulness and awareness of what's happening, it's about seeing that space between stimulus and response and being able to have it in a way that you can be more intentional on how you want to show up for your life. And maybe that means you choose to have conservative values, liberal values, to be in a relationship, to be single, to be motivated by money, to be motivated by something else. That is your journey. And I just think in general, the world becomes a better place when people see that they have that choice, because it's usually in that choice people slow down enough, they get out of their self-orientation enough to make decisions that are inspired by like their actual humanity rather than thoughts and ideas and past conditioning that's just blindly driving them into the next moment. And so on the whole, that ends up being a better way of living for most people.
Yeah, I feel like we could do a whole podcast on that in terms of where a person does make their choices from, like you said, past conditioning or sort of habituated responses. There's anyway, that's rich terrain there.
Yeah.
I have another question for you as we begin to wind down. Talk about the witness just for a minute. I hear this question a lot from people over the years around meditation is when someone says, okay, you need to develop a witness, kind of, it's sort of like you saying we need to hold space for our experience. Well, who's the one holding space?
Right.
How does one cultivate a witness especially if they don't know what you're talking about? Like, can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So if someone were to, or for anyone feeling like I need to cultivate a witness or develop a witness, the first thing I'd say around it is, well, good news is there's nothing you need to cultivate. If this witness that we're talking about is already there and it's witnessing you right now, whether you realize it or not. So that witness space has different words in different contexts. Some people might call it awareness. Some people might call it witness. Some people might call it the higher self. Some people might call it soul. Some people might call it consciousness. Some might call it God. It's this capacity of being that sort of just knows what is happening, but is not sucked into what is happening. The easiest way to connect to it is just to be aware of your thinking. Because most of the time, the small self, the ego, the opposite, I don't know if I wouldn't say it's the opposite, but the part that we most identify with, like who we are, is almost solely created through thought. And we live our lives based on thought. We're evaluating the moment based on thought. We're evaluating ourselves based on thought. And so to step back from that is the quickest way to see that, oh, who I am might be different. And as soon as, this is where meditation is great, as soon as you start becoming aware of your thoughts, it throws into question everything you typically think you know about yourself, which is like, okay, if there's a part of me that can be aware of my thinking, then, and I'm not my thoughts, then who am I? And that's the big question that we're all still exploring. And I don't think anyone has a decisive answer. If anything, it just gives more space around who we might be or who we might not be. So if you're looking to connect to that witness, sit down in a meditation. Doesn't have to be a fancy posture. You could close your eyes and just start watching yourself think. Watch every thought that arises. You could just label it thinking, and notice that there's a part of you that has to observe what is happening in order to know what is happening. That part of you that we might call the witness or awareness is what we're touching into with that. Some might even call it metacognition, but the hippies, and myself included, like to think of it as something bigger than just like this very basic like awareness of thoughts. It's this dimension of us that kind of connects the thread of our entire being, all the different parts of us. You can't have any moment without this awareness, and yet we're so out of touch with it. We're so consumed by the thoughts, the ideas, the emotions, that we can go our entire lives just like in the river.
Yeah,
so the river
reacting.
being like, yeah. So
Cory, can
sure.
we ground this with an example from like just a relationship example? So work with me here. Let's say I'm triggered by my partner, and the story in my mind, I'm like, she's wrong. I can't believe she did that. So let's just say that. So how do I, and I'm kind of fused to that in the moment until I can slow down enough.
Yeah.
What can I do there to kind of cultivate this observer?
Well, in the moment when we're caught in this, like that kind of reactivity, it's very hard to connect to the observer unless we have a pretty deep practice, where we're going to be activating other parts of the brain, like the amygdala, that are going to be in overdrive, and we're going to feel very consumed to that reactivity. So the first thing I would do is just like take a breath, maybe not even say anything, just take a breath.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, yes, we can observe the thinking mind, but I would bring it into the conversation with your partner, tracking what is happening for you in that moment and bringing it in, and saying like, I'm having this reaction right now. Like, the thought in my head is that you're wrong and I'm right. I want to challenge that. I'm not saying that that's the truth in this moment, but that's how I'm feeling right now. And just being able to name it, like to take it out of your experience, put it into words, will take away some of the subconscious fueling of it,
Mm-hmm.
and requires stepping into that observer witness kind of space.
Yeah, totally. I love that you said this, because this is really what we're trying to teach here at the relationship school, is this capacity to do what you just said, which is I get triggered. I do something to slow the whole process down, or I have my reaction time. It could be a minute, could be 10 minutes, a day, whatever it is. But as soon as possible, I come back around and say what I notice about myself, right? Like, wow, I really am in my head making you wrong right now.
Yes.
That is a massive step, because you're taking responsibility for what you want to do, but you're actually slowed down enough to not do it, because you know that that's going to actually hurt things more,
Yes, 100%. And I just want to reinforce, like, for those that are listening, that sometimes this can be easy, but for a lot of people, myself included, this can be extremely difficult.
Yes.
Like, these patterns are so deep; they're often related to like developmental trauma stuff, and so to not perpetuate these deeply conditioned patterns in the moment is massive work, and requires what often feels like, to me, a pretty significant risk. And an example recently, while I was writing my book with my partner, I was just like so in the trenches with it. It sucked. And I was talking to her, and she asked how the day was going. And I said something like, I was like, oh, it's going well. Going okay. And she went into like saying whatever she was going through, but she was like happy. And a part of me wanted her to like be sad and go, oh no, tell me what's going on. Like, tell me more about this. And like, it's okay. It's going to be all right. Which is a deep pattern that I remember with my mother. Right. So, like, if something's off and I say it's off, she goes, oh, what's wrong, honey? Like, and so it was my way of getting love. And she wasn't giving that to me. So I kind of get in a pissy, pouty mood until she finally will come around. But I caught myself in that moment, and this felt so hard to do, but I took a leap with it, and I said, I just have to tell you, like, what's going on right now. I feel myself trying to make you wrong, or like trying to be in a negative mood so that you'll ask me how I'm doing, because I'm actually not doing as well. And as soon as I said it, this weight was lifted off my shoulders, and it brought us closer. She was grateful for it. And so, of course, there might be scenarios where like something like that is said and it could trigger the other person for some reason. And we want to acknowledge the reality of that. But learning to bring this into the connection rather than trying to connect in spite of it, I think, is the key to this deep work.
Yeah. Yeah. Really well said. Thanks for that example. That's so great. Yeah. I mean, when we're vulnerable, right, it's like vulnerability. There was quite a bit of vulnerability in your ownership there. You were letting her into your world a little bit, Yeah.
And something like that felt shameful. Like, I'm the meditation teacher. I shouldn't be like needing, whatever. We're all going to have our own stories, but that was the one for me in that moment. And so it's been big work for me to bring that in. But every time I do, it deepens intimacy and it loosens the shackles of that conditioning on my psyche.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Nice. Cory, what final parting advice here do you have for all of us out there in fear or struggling or feeling the pinch? If we're feeling the squeeze, the challenge, what would you say just to the listener here?
Yeah, I gave a lot of my little tidbit practical stuff. I think the big encapsulating thing that we could all apply right now is lead from love, not from fear. And you don't have to be a leader in the traditional sense to do that. Everything that you're working through, the phone calls you need to make, the adjustments you need to make, the people you need to take care of, I believe all of that can be done out of love. And some would argue there are two motivating factors and forces in the world: fear or love. And when I think we all think of like the world we more want to live into, it would be one where those actions are motivated by love. So see if you can integrate that into everything you're doing right now, and if nothing else, it will make the experience feel more rich, rewarding, and connect us rather than distance us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, awesome. And if you're wondering how, we just went through how.
yeah,
How to do that.
yeah.
Cory just gave us so much wisdom here. Great. And if people want to follow up more with you to continue to get more of the how, to hear your meditation teachings,
Yeah.
and to listen to some of your downloadable, MP3s, read your book, where should folks go?
Yeah, if anyone wants free resources, book recommendations, app recommendations, meditations, you could just text your email address to 631-405-4631. Just type +1 if you're outside the US. And that'll give a bunch of resources to start for free. I put a lot of my teachings on Instagram as well at Cory Muscara. And I run a daily podcast called Practicing Human that has just short 10-minute tidbits each day that I think could also be really useful during these times.
Oh, amazing. One last question for you, Cory. I ask all my guests this.
Mm.
One of our missions here at the Relationship School is to reach 1 million teens and young adults with relationship education. We want to help kids work out their differences with each other in a respectful, honorable way, because we think the world will be a little better off. So if I was speaking to 1,000, let's say high school students, and I could only teach them or share with them one thing about relationships, and you were whispering in my ear, what would you want me to tell them?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. You are worthy of connection. Yeah, I think something like that, that gets people in touch with that they're worth being connected to, that they are good enough to have connection, to experience love, to experience intimacy. And that so many of our issues, I think, in relationship come from a self-hatred or not feeling good enough or worthy of the love or unconditional love of another person. And when we can start to make that journey ourselves, connection tends to happen a little more easily. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, man. Really, really appreciate you and what you're up to in the world. Thanks again for helping ground us today. Thank you very much, Cory.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
All right, go to CoryMuscara.com. That's Cory with a Y, CoryMuscara.com to find out more about Cory, his books, meditations, podcast, resources. All right. Nice. Okay, action step. I think the action step from this episode, there's a lot, a couple, but I think you should go back and just listen to the kind of 5 to 8 step meditation that he walked us through. Remember, give it space to be felt, take a breath, feel where your body is gripping, notice what you're feeling, thank the fear for arising, what's the story in versus what if the story, what can I control? Is it possible to do what I need to do with less stress? In fact, you could start with that question. Is it possible to do what I need to do with less stress? If the answer is yes, or a probably, then come back and do this exercise. Just set your timer for 5 minutes and do it, okay? And then as always, share it with a friend. Share what you did and what you learned about yourself. It's just a deepening exercise with another person, someone you care about. Hey, I did this little 5-minute meditation. It calmed me down. I feel a little less stressed now, etc. Okay, so that's always the kind of bonus step for you on these action steps is to make it relational. Share it with someone. All right. Share your experience of it. Nice. Yeah, a lot of good discussions in here. Man, loss of control, the fear of discomfort, the being human stuff, witnessing, self-mastery versus self-acceptance. I feel like there are some good takeaways. So I hope this was valuable in this time. Stay safe, everybody. Stay healthy, stay strong. And again, feel free to hang with us over at relationshipschool.com/community. It's one way to be in touch. Make sure you're on our email list because we offered a bunch of free coaching. We offered a free course. But you got to be actually following us because sometimes the podcast doesn't come out for a month after I record it or a couple days. So sometimes it's not as timely as it could be. If you want the most up-to-date info, you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, and you make sure you're on our email list. All right? Okay. Blessings, everybody. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Relationship School fans and Smart Couple listeners, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, all right? Do us a favor, subscribe, share one of these videos with a friend, all right? We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.